The night sky above the alien world was filled with red clouds, glowing as if fire burned inside them. The air was heavy with smoke, and strange voices echoed across the stone valley. An ancient temple stood in the center, built from black rock, that shone under the red light. Inside the temple, thousands of alien cult members gathered, their faces hidden behind masks made of bone and metal. They moved in circles, chanting words so old that even they did not fully understand them. But their leaders, the high priests, believed the chants would bring back a forgotten power. They believed this power would destroy humanity once and for all. At the heart of the temple stood a massive altar, carved with glowing symbols. Strange blue fire burned in bowls around it, making the shadows stretch across the walls. The high priest raised his long arms, his voice deep and commanding. "Tonight," he declared, "we call upon the Eternal One, the destroyer of weak races, the bringer of chaos." The cult cheered, their voices like thunder in the temple. "The humans think they are strong," the priest continued, "but they are nothing. Fragile creatures, born from dirt and destined to return to dirt." The cult laughed, the sound sharp and cruel in their eyes. Humanity was only a temporary mistake of the universe, something that could be erased. But in the corner of the temple, chained to the cold stone floor, knelt a human. His name was Captain Elias Kane, a soldier taken prisoner during a desperate battle. His uniform was torn, his face bruised, but his eyes still burned with defiance. He had been forced to watch as the cult prepared their ritual. He had heard their chants and their insults, but he did not bow, he did not look away. He knew that humans had faced gods and monsters before, and somehow they had survived. The cult ignored him, believing he was broken. They did not see the quiet fire inside him. They thought chains could hold a human spirit. But Cain knew better. The chanting grew louder, shaking the walls of the temple. The floor cracked as the symbols glowed brighter. The high priest lifted a black dagger, its blade curved and dripping with thick green liquid. He turned toward Cain, pointing the blade at him. "This human will be our sacrifice," the priest shouted. "His weakness will feed the Eternal One." The crowd screamed with excitement, their voices rising like a storm. They wanted to see blood. They wanted to see humanity fall. Cain raised his head, his voice calm but sharp. "You think we are weak," he said, his words echoing across the chamber. "You think humans break easily." The cult laughed again, but some shifted uneasily. There was something in his tone, something that did not sound like fear. The high priest sneered, stepping closer. "Your words mean nothing. Human, you are only prey. And prey does not speak to hunters." He lifted the dagger higher, ready to strike. But at that moment, the altar pulsed with light. The air grew colder. The fire around the temple turned blue. The chanting stopped as silence fell across the chamber. Everyone turned toward the altar, eyes wide with awe and terror. The stone began to move, the symbols spreading like veins, glowing brighter and brighter. A deep sound rumbled from beneath the floor, shaking the temple as dust fell from the ceiling. The high priest dropped to his knees, spreading his arms. "It begins," he whispered, his voice trembling with both fear and joy. "The Eternal One comes to us." Cain watched, his heart beating faster. He did not know what was rising from beneath the altar, but he knew one thing. The cult had made a mistake. He had seen it before in the wars of Earth. Arrogance always came before the fall, and tonight, the cult's arrogance would cost them everything. The stone cracked open, a blinding light poured out. A massive shape began to form, its body made of swirling energy. The cult cried out in worship, but Cain's eyes narrowed. This was no servant. This was no obedient beast. Something inside the light moved, restless, powerful, dangerous. The high priest raised his dagger again, shouting, "O Eternal One, take this human, take his life, and give us your power." But as the creature rose higher, its blazing eyes fell not on the priest. They fell on Cain, and for the first time that night, the cult grew silent. Their ritual had not gone as they planned. Captain Elias Kane sat in the shadows of the great alien temple, the chains on his wrists biting into his skin. The cult still chanted, their voices like thunder rolling through the chamber. But Kane's eyes never left the creature rising from the altar. It was massive, a swirling storm of light and energy, its form shifting as if it could not decide what shape to take. Cult called it the Eternal One, but to Kane, it looked more like a force of nature than a god. And yet, for some reason, its burning eyes stayed locked on him. The high priest raised his arms again, trying to regain control. Eternal One, look at us. Your loyal children, he shouted, his voice sharp. Take this human as our gift, and grant us your power. The cult cheered, pounding their fists against the stone floor. They thought the creature would obey, but Kane saw hesitation in its movements. The being tilted its head, as if confused by the command, as if listening to something else. Kane smirked through his pain. He knew the cult had no idea what they were truly summoning. He had seen arrogance before, leaders who believed they could control weapons they did not understand. It always ended the same way. They were consumed by their own pride. The cult dragged Kane forward, forcing him onto the altar. The black dagger gleamed in the priest's hand, its blade wet with venom. The crowd screamed louder, eager for blood, eager to see a human fall. But Kane did not tremble. He looked straight at the creature above him, and he whispered, "You don't belong to them, do you?" The creature flickered, its energy pulsing brighter for a moment. The high priest growled in anger, pushing Kane down. "Silence, human. You are nothing but fuel." He raised the dagger, ready to plunge it into Kane's chest, but the blade never struck. The creature released a wave of light, blasting across the temple. The priest was thrown backward, his mask shattering on the stone. The cult screamed in panic, some dropping to the ground in terror. The dagger clattered against the altar, and Kane felt the chains around his arms glow and break. For the first time in days, he was free. He staggered to his feet, blood on his lips but fire in his eyes. He stood face to face with the creature. Its form flickered again, showing glimpses of shapes: an eagle, a lion, even a human silhouette. It was searching, trying to understand. Kane realized it was not just looking at him, it was looking through him. It was seeing his memories, his battles, his pain, his victories. Flashes of earth appeared in the light. The creature saw humans climbing mountains, crossing oceans, surviving wars. It saw people rebuilding cities after disasters. It saw children laughing even in broken streets. It saw humanity's endless struggle to rise after every fall. The cult had called humans weak, but the creature now saw something else, something stronger than all their rituals. Kane clenched his fists, his voice firm. "You see it, don't you? We don't kneel, we don't give up, we fight until the last breath." The creature pulsed brighter. As if answering him, the cult screamed in confusion. The high priest stumbled to his feet, his face twisted with rage. "No, you belong to us," he shouted at the creature. "You are ours." But the being did not listen. It turned its gaze toward Kane, and the temple shook with its silent roar. The chains on the altar shattered. The blue fire rose higher. The cult tried to chant again, but their voices broke under the weight of fear. They realized too late that their ritual had failed. They had tried to control power, but instead, they had given it to the very enemy they hated. Kane stood taller, no longer a prisoner, no longer a victim. He felt the creature's energy flowing around him like a storm waiting to be guided. The cult backed away, whispering in terror. One of them cried out, "It listens to him. The human controls it." The high priest roared in denial, his voice cracking. "No, impossible. Humans are nothing. Humans are dust." Kane took a step forward, his shadow stretching across the broken floor. He looked at the priest, his eyes burning with the same fire as the being above him. "Dust can rise into storms," Kane said softly, but his words cut like blades. "And storms can destroy empires." The creature pulsed again. the air vibrating with its power. The cult stumbled back in fear, their once mighty ritual now broken. For the first time, they began to understand their fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity, and in doing so, they had unleashed something far beyond their control. The temple shook again as cracks spread through the walls. The creature's light grew stronger, filling every shadow. Cain stood beneath it, unafraid, his heart steady. He was no longer just a prisoner. He was the spark of humanity in the heart of an alien world. And that spark was about to ignite a fire no cult could ever contain. The temple groaned under the weight of unseen power, cracks racing along its ancient walls. The Eternal One's form blazed brighter, its energy surging like a storm ready to break free. Cult members stumbled back, their chants forgotten, their proud voices drowned by the creature's presence. The high priest screamed at them to continue, but his words carried no strength now. The very God he had called upon no longer obeyed him. Captain Elias Cain stood tall upon the shattered altar, his breath heavy, but his eyes sharp. The chains were gone, broken like paper before the force of the being above him. He should have been afraid, standing so close to a power that could erase him with a single thought. But instead, he felt something strange. The creature was not only watching him, it was listening. The Eternal One shifted its shape again, waves of light rolling across its body. It showed flashes of images, as if speaking in a language of vision instead of words. Cain saw battles fought long ago, civilizations crushed, worlds turned to ash. Under its wrath, the cult gasped in awe, thinking this was proof of their control. But then the visions changed, the light shifted, showing scenes from Cain's memories. Humans standing in burning cities but refusing to kneel, soldiers holding the line against overwhelming forces, families rebuilding homes from rubble, children laughing in the face of hunger. The Eternal One trembled as it absorbed these images. For the first time in its existence, it witnessed something different from destruction. It saw resistance, it saw survival, it saw hope. The cult panicked, realizing the being's attention was fixed on Cain alone. The high priest roared with rage, his voice breaking. "No, not him. Look at us. We are your servants, your faithful children." He slashed his own palm with the dagger, spilling green blood onto the altar. "Take my offering. Take our lives, but obey." The creature did not move. Its burning eyes remained on the human. Cain took a step forward, his voice steady. "You're not theirs. You never were," he said, his words quiet but strong. "They see you as a weapon, but you're more than that, aren't you?" The Eternal One flickered, its storm-like body bending closer to him. The air around Cain vibrated, heavy and alive. He felt the energy pressing against his chest like a heartbeat not his own. The cult fell to their knees, terrified. Some began to scream prayers, begging the creature to return to them. Others fled toward the shadows, desperate to escape. But the high priest refused to bow, his pride stronger than his fear. "You are ours," he spat, his voice trembling. "We called you, we command you." He raised the dagger again, its venom dripping onto the stone floor. "If you will not obey, then I will cut the human down myself." The priest lunged toward Cain, but before the blade could touch him, a blast of light exploded from the Eternal One. The priest was thrown backward, his body crashing against the temple wall. His mask shattered completely, revealing twisted features scarred by years of rituals. He coughed blood, but his eyes still burned with hatred. Even broken, he would not admit his defeat. The Eternal One lowered itself further, its form shifting until it hovered just above Cain, its light wrapped around him, not burning, not crushing, but protecting. Cain felt warmth flood through him, filling the cracks left by pain and exhaustion. For a moment, he almost collapsed from the weight of it, but then he straightened, standing firm beneath the being's gaze. Around them, the cult shouted in fear. One voice rose above the others, trembling with disbelief. "It listens to him. The human commands it." The words spread like fire through the crowd. Panic erupted. The proud worshippers, now nothing more than frightened animals. They realized their fatal mistake. They had brought forth a god and handed it to humanity. Cain clenched his fists, staring at the high priest who struggled to rise again. "You called me weak," Cain said, his voice sharp. "But weakness does not survive what we've survived." His words echoed through the chamber, each syllable carried by the power of the being itself. The walls shook, the fires roared higher. The Eternal One let out a sound, not a roar, not words, but something deeper. It was the sound of awakening. The cult tried to run, their robes fluttering as they pushed through broken doors and shattered stone. But the Eternal One spread its light across the chamber, sealing every exit. They were trapped, forced to face the truth they had denied. The high priest screamed curses, his pride collapsing into fear. "You will burn for this, human. You will burn with us." But Cain only looked up at the creature, and the creature answered. A surge of power shook the valley, tearing through the sky. The red clouds split apart, revealing endless stars above. The Eternal One lifted its form higher, its storm expanding until it touched the heavens, and yet its light remained anchored to Cain. The bond between them was undeniable now. The awakening was complete. Cain took a deep breath, his voice steady. "They wanted you to destroy us, but you chose differently." The Eternal One pulsed, as if agreeing. The cult whimpered in terror, their empire crumbling in the face of a single human's defiance. And as the stars trembled above, Captain Elias Cain understood. This was no longer about survival. This was about legacy. The awakening of the Eternal One had not given power to the cult. It had given power to humanity. Asterisk. Asterisk, asterisk. The temple floor trembled as the Eternal One rose higher, its form spreading like a storm of living light. The cult cried out in terror, their chants forgotten, their faith shattered. They had summoned a god, but that god was no longer theirs. Its gaze remained fixed on the human, Captain Elias Cain, who stood unbowed beneath its brilliance. Cain could feel the energy moving through him like fire and thunder. It was not crushing him, it was not burning him. Instead, it filled him with a strength he had never known. He felt his heartbeat match the rhythm of the creature's pulse. Each breath he took seemed to echo in the chamber like the voice of humanity itself. The Eternal One flickered again, showing visions across its shifting body. The cult saw their ancient wars, the countless worlds they had conquered. They saw themselves in glory, marching over the ashes of others. But then the visions changed. Scenes of Earth filled the temple soldiers on muddy fields, explorers crossing dangerous seas, firemen running into flames, children standing tall even in ruins. The cult gasped, unable to understand what they were seeing. "Why does it show them?" one whispered in fear. "Why humans?" Cain raised, his voice strong and steady. "Because we do not break," he said. "Because even when the universe tries to erase us, we fight, we endure." His words carried beyond his throat, carried by the Eternal One itself. The walls shook as if the temple itself agreed with him. The high priest staggered to his feet, his face pale, his pride trembling. "No," he roared, spitting blood. "This is impossible. Humans are weak. Humans are nothing." He raised the dagger high, desperate to reclaim control. But the Eternal One's light flared, and the dagger melted into dust before it could strike. The priest fell to his knees, staring at the empty hilt in horror. The cult began to wail, their faith turning into fear. Some tried to flee, throwing themselves against sealed doors. Others clawed at the stone floor, begging their God to forgive them. But the Eternal One ignored them. Its storm-like body bent lower toward Cain, glowing brighter with every heartbeat. Cain clenched his fists, staring at the crowd of broken worshippers. "You thought humanity was fragile," he said, his voice sharp like steel. "But you never understood us. Our strength is not in our bodies. It is in our will." The Eternal One pulsed again, sending waves of power crashing through the chamber. Statues of alien gods shattered, the altar split down. The middle, The cult screamed as the symbols of their faith crumbled before their eyes. Cain felt the creature's thoughts press against his own. Images flashed through his mind, galaxies burning, stars collapsing, worlds falling silent. It had been used for destruction again and again, but now it looked to him, waiting, listening, for the first time. Cain realized the truth. The Eternal One was not only awakening, it was choosing. You want to know what power is? Cain whispered, his voice trembling but strong. Power is not in chains, it is not in fear. It is in standing when you should fall, it is in rising. Again, when the world pushes you down, the Eternal One flared brighter, its light pouring across the temple. Every cultist fell to the ground, blinded by the radiance. They felt the truth of Cain's words strike deeper than any blade. The high priest clawed at the floor, screaming, "No, you cannot choose him. He is only human. He is dust." Cain turned toward him, his eyes burning like fire. "Dust can rise into storms," he said, repeating the words he had spoken before. "And storms can tear down empires." The Eternal One released a wave of light that ripped through the temple. The ceiling cracked open, sending fragments of stone crashing to the floor. Through the hole above, stars shone brighter than ever before. The cult's voices broke into desperate cries, their arrogance finally consumed by terror. Cain stood unshaken, his voice rising over the chaos. "You thought you could control everything. You thought you could make the universe bow." He looked at the trembling priests, their masks broken, their pride shattered. "But you forgot the one truth of humanity. We never stop fighting." The Eternal One echoed his words with a rumble that shook the valley. Its storm spread across the sky, stretching far beyond the temple. The world itself trembled under its awakening. But Cain remained at the center of it all, the human who had turned a weapon of destruction into a symbol of defiance. The high priest tried one last time to rise, his body shaking, his eyes wide with madness. "You will bring ruin to us all," he spat. Cain stepped closer, the Eternal One's light wrapping around him like armor. "No," Cain answered, his voice steady as stone. "I will bring truth, and humanity will never kneel." The Eternal One roared, a sound of storms and fire. The cult covered their ears, screaming in pain. The walls of the temple collapsed outward, stone crashing into the valley beyond. The black altar split apart, glowing symbols fading into nothing. The age of the cult was ending, and the age of something new was beginning. Cain looked up at the blazing form above him. He felt the bond between them grow stronger. The Eternal One had seen the strength of humanity, and it had chosen. The cult had called humans fragile, but now even a god of destruction knew the truth. There was nothing more powerful than the will of humanity. The valley shook as the Eternal One's light spread across the ruins of the temple. The stars above shimmered as though the universe itself had opened its eyes. The alien cult staggered back in fear, their faith broken, their god no longer theirs. But fear soon twisted into desperation, for even in terror, the cult refused to surrender. The high priest rose again, his body trembling but his pride unbroken. He tore the remains of his mask from his face, revealing scars that ran deep into his skin. His eyes burned with hatred as he raised his arms. "Do not bow, children of the cult," he roared. "This being does not belong to the human. It belongs to us." The cult answered with cries of rage. Though their voices shook, they were afraid, but their loyalty to their leader was strong. And in that loyalty, they turned to violence. From hidden chambers in the walls, warriors stepped forth, armed with blades of plasma and rifles of fire. Their armor gleamed with symbols of the cult, glowing red under the Eternal One's light. They surrounded the altar, their weapons aimed at Cain and the towering creature. The high priest pointed his hand toward the human. "Kill him, tear the weakness from this place," he commanded. The soldiers obeyed, their weapons charging with deadly energy. Cain stood still, his fists clenched, his eyes never leaving the soldiers. He had fought armies before, but never with a storm of light at his side. The Eternal One pulsed, its form bending low, waiting for his command. Cain's voice rang across the chamber. You want to fight humanity? Then fight the will of a people who never give in. The soldiers fired. Beams of red plasma filling the air, but the Eternal One spread its light, forming a shield that absorbed the blasts like rain falling into an ocean. The ground shook as the creature answered Cain's courage with fury. It unleashed waves of energy, hurling soldiers into the walls. Weapons melted, armor shattered, and screams filled the air, yet the cult did not stop. They rushed forward with blades, desperate to kill the human who had stolen their god. Cain fought too, his hands no longer bound. He picked up a fallen blade and slashed through the chaos. Every strike he made was guided by memory fights on Earth, wars in the stars, battles where humans had stood when no one else would. The Eternal One mirrored his movements, striking where Cain looked, shielding him when he faltered. Together, they moved like one, man and God, soldier and storm. The high priest watched in horror as his army fell. Every blast they fired, every charge they made, crumbled before the human's defiance. "This cannot be," the priest muttered, his voice breaking. But deep inside, he knew the truth. His empire was collapsing, not by a fleet, not by an army, but by one human and the will he carried. Cain stood in the center of the battlefield, blood on his face but fire in his eyes. He lifted the blade high and shouted, "Humanity does not bow. Humanity does not break." The Eternal One echoed his cry, releasing a roar of thunder and light. The remaining cultists froze in terror, their courage vanishing. They had seen gods destroy worlds, but never had they seen a god fight for a human. The high priest stumbled back, his hands shaking. No, this was our power, ours," he screamed. He turned toward the Eternal One, his voice breaking. "Obey me. I am your master. I am your voice." But the creature only flared brighter, its gaze locked on Cain. The bond was undeniable, unbreakable. The Eternal One had chosen its side. The last soldiers fell silent, their weapons broken, their courage gone, the air filled with smoke and light, the temple nothing more than rubble. Cain stood tall among the ruins, his chest rising with every heavy breath. The high priest stared at him, his pride collapsing into despair. "You have doomed us all," he whispered. But Cain's answer was sharp and steady. "No, you doomed yourself the moment you underestimated humanity." The Eternal One pulsed again, its light spreading across the valley. The cultists dropped to their knees, unable to stand against the weight of its presence. For the first time, they felt powerless, truly powerless. The human they had mocked now stood as their judge. The storm they had called now roared for someone else. Cain raised his voice, his words heavy with meaning. "You called us fragile, but look around you. Your walls are broken, your armies shattered, your faith crumbles under the truth." He pointed the blade toward the priest. "Humanity is small, yes, but we rise, we fight, and we endure." The Eternal One thundered in agreement. Its storm surged outward, blasting apart the last of the temple's towers. The valley echoed with the sound of finality. The high priest fell to the ground, tears of rage streaming down his scarred face. "You are only human," he muttered weakly. Cain stepped closer, his voice sharp as steel. "And that is why you lost." The battle was over. The turning point had come. The cult's god had awakened, but not for them. It had awakened for humanity, and the universe would never forget it. The temple was gone, reduced to rubble beneath the burning sky. The Eternal One towered above the ruins, its storm-like body spreading across the valley. Lightning of pure energy crackled through its form. Thunder shook the mountains. Every cultist who remained fell to their knees, their faces pale with terror. They had prayed for a god to serve them, but now they trembled before a god that had chosen a human instead. Captain Elias Cain stood at the heart of it all, his chest rising with heavy breaths. The Eternal One's light wrapped around him like armor, warm and unshakable. For a moment, he felt no pain, no fear, only strength. It was as if the will of humanity itself pulsed inside him. The high priest crawled backward, his hands shaking. His voice cracked with desperation as he shouted, Stop this, you will destroy us all. You will tear this world apart. Cain's eyes locked on him, steady and cold. You wanted destruction, he said, his voice cutting through the storm. You wanted power to erase my people. Now you will taste the storm you called. The Eternal One flared brighter, its energy pulsing in rhythm with Cain's words. Together, man and God unleashed their wrath. A wave of light burst outward, tearing through the valley like a tidal wave. Stone towers crumbled, the ground split open, and fire rose from cracks in the earth. The cult screamed, many trying to flee into the mountains, but the Eternal One's storm stretched far, sealing every path. Bolts of energy fell like spears, striking down those who still clung to their faith. Cain walked forward through the chaos, his steps steady. He was not just a prisoner anymore, not just a soldier. He was the voice of a species that had been mocked, hunted, and underestimated. Humanity does not kneel, he said again, his words echoing like thunder. The Eternal One mirrored his fury, sending blasts of light into the heart of the cult. The high priest tried to rally his followers, his voice shrill with madness. Stand, fight, he's only a man, he cannot hold this power. But the cult no longer believed, their courage shattered. They saw what the priest could not, the truth burning before their eyes. A single human had turned their God against them. Cain raised his arm, and the Eternal One answered. A storm of energy swept across the battlefield, striking down warriors, shattering weapons, melting armor. The screams of the cult echoed across the valley, mixing with the thunder of the storm. Some begged for mercy, others cursed his name. But Cain did not falter. They had chosen this path. They had built their empire on chains and blood. And now their own arrogance had brought them to ruin. The high priest's face twisted in rage and despair. You will destroy everything, he shouted, even your own soul. But Cain shook his head, his voice calm even in the storm. No, this is not destruction. This is justice. The Eternal One bent low, its blazing form surrounding Cain like a halo of fire. Through it, Cain could feel the creature's thoughts. It had been a weapon for so long, used only for war. But now it shared his will, his vision. Together they chose not to enslave, but to punish those who had dared to call humanity weak. The storm grew wilder, lightning slashing through the sky. Cultists fell one by one, their cries lost in the roar of energy. The mountains shook, stones tumbled, rivers boiled from the heat of the storm. The valley itself was becoming a grave for the cult. Cain stepped closer to the high priest, his shadow stretching across the broken ground. The priest tried to crawl away, his words trembling. You cannot do this, you are only human. Cain's voice cut him like a blade. Exactly, and that is why you lost. The Eternal One flared, sending one final blast across the ruins. The last of the cult's warriors were consumed, their weapons turning to ash, their cries fading into silence. Only the high priest remained, broken and trembling. He stared up at Cain with eyes full of rage and despair. You think this makes you powerful, human? You think this makes you kind? Worthy? Cain bent lower, his voice a whisper, but sharper than thunder. This is not about power, it is about survival. And we survive because we never stop fighting. The Eternal One roared one last time, a sound that shook the stars above. The storm finally calmed, its light folding inward. The valley was silent, nothing left but ruins and ash. The cult had been erased, their arrogance buried beneath the storm they had summoned. Cain stood tall, his chest rising with slow, steady breaths. The Eternal One hovered above him, its form still blazing, but quieter now. Together they looked across the ruins. The wrath of humanity had spoken, and it had left nothing standing. The high priest lay on the ground, broken but alive. He glared at Cain, his voice weak but filled with hate. This is not the end, human. Others will come. Others will rise against you. Cain's eyes narrowed, his voice steady. Then we will rise again too, because that is what it means to be human. The priest's eyes filled with despair. He had seen the truth now, the truth his pride had blinded him from. The The power of humanity was not in size, or weapons, or numbers. It was in spirit, in defiance, in the will to stand when no one else could. As the storm faded, Cain looked up at the stars above. The Eternal One hovered silently, its blazing form watching him with something almost like respect. The valley was silent, the cult destroyed, but Cain knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning of something greater. Humanity's spirit had been revealed, and the galaxy would never forget it. The storm faded, leaving only silence over the valley. Smoke curled upward from shattered stones, and the once mighty temple of the cult was nothing more than rubble. The Eternal One floated above the ruins, its form calmer now, glowing like a star that had chosen peace after war. Captain Elias Cain stood in the center of the devastation, his body bruised, his uniform torn, but his spirit unbroken. Around him lay the remains of the cult, their cries silenced, their arrogance turned to dust. The high priest crawled among the stones, his body broken, his eyes burning with stubborn hate. He raised his head toward Cain, his voice weak but bitter. You think this is victory, human, but it is only a moment. Others will come, stronger than us, stronger than you. Cain looked down at him, his face steady. Then we will rise again, he said, his voice calm. Because that is who we are. The priest spat blood, his voice trembling. You cannot fight the galaxy. You cannot fight forever. Cain knelt beside him, his eyes sharp and clear. Forever is not the point, he answered. The point is that humanity never stops fighting, and that is something your kind will never understand. The priest's eyes widened as the truth sank in. His last breath left him in silence, and he collapsed among the ruins. The age of the cult ended in that moment, their leader gone, their god turned against them. The Eternal One bent lower, its storm-like body pulsing softly. Cain looked up at it, his face lit by its glow. For a moment, there was no sound, no words, only the quiet bond between them. Cain felt the creature's thoughts press gently against his own. Not commanding, not forcing, but asking. It had been used as a weapon for countless ages, but now it wanted to choose, and it had chosen humanity. Cain placed a hand over his chest, his voice quiet but steady. If you stay with us, you will see what real strength means, not the strength of chains or fear, but the strength of spirit. The Eternal One flared brighter, its light stretching across the valley like dawn breaking after endless night. The stars above seemed to shimmer in response, as if the universe itself had heard his words from the rubble. A few surviving prisoners emerged, alien slaves who had once been chained by the cult. They looked at Cain with awe and fear, whispering among themselves, "This human." He turned their god, one said, trembling. Another replied, "If humanity can do this, then perhaps they are not weak at all." Word would spread. Cain knew, faster than light, the galaxy would hear the story of this night, the night when a single human defied a cult and lived. Cain walked among the ruins, the Eternal One following like a silent guardian. The ground still smoldered, the air still heavy with smoke, but for Cain, there was a strange peace. He thought of Earth, of his people, of the long history of struggle and survival. This victory was not his alone, it was theirs. Every man and woman who had ever stood against the impossible and refused to fall. He stopped at the broken altar, its symbols now faint, its power gone. He placed his hand against the cold stone. This is where they thought humanity would end. He said softly, "But this is where humanity begins." His words echoed through the ruins, carried by the Eternal One's light. The surviving slaves gathered closer, their eyes wide with wonder. One stepped forward, a young alien with chains still around his wrists. "Human," he said quietly, "what will you do now?" Cain looked at him, his jaw firm. "We will fight," he answered, "not for power, not for empires, but for freedom, for everyone who refuses to kneel." The Eternal One pulsed in agreement, its storm rolling gently across the sky. Cain lifted his eyes to the stars. He knew this was only the beginning. The cult had fallen, but the galaxy was full of others who would rise against humanity. They would call them weak, They would try to break them, but the truth had been revealed tonight. The greatest power in the universe was not in weapons, not in gods, not in empires. It was in the spirit of a single human refusing to kneel. The valley lay silent, but Cain's words carried across it like fire. "Remember this," he said, his voice strong. "We are human, we may fall, but we will always rise again, and we will never bow." The Eternal One roared softly, not in rage this time, but in defiance. Together, man and God stood beneath. The stars, a symbol of what humanity truly was. Not fragile, not weak, but unbreakable. As dawn broke over the alien world, the ruins glowed in the light of a new day. The cult was gone, but their mistake would echo forever. They had underestimated humanity, and that mistake had ended them. Cain turned away from the ruins, his steps steady, his shadow stretching across the valley. The Eternal One followed, a storm of light bound not by chains, but by choice. The galaxy would hear this story. And in every corner of the stars, one truth would remain. Humanity had faced gods, and humanity had stood. The legacy of defiance had begun, and it would never fade.